there, everyone. Welcome to Lunch for the Soul. I'm Melissa Wilson. Are you stuck? Are you stuck in a rut? Well, we want to get you out of there. Nobody's got time for that. We only have one chance at life, and let's just make it our very best. Let's lead our very best, strongest lives. And you may be thinking, yeah, right. How do I do that? Well, that's why I have the perfect guest to help us out with that. Right now, I'm bringing in Jimn Kyles, which happens to be the pastor of Anchor Bend Church in neighboring Richmond. Hello, welcome to Lunch for the Soul.
Hello, Melissa. Yes, thank you for inviting me to be a part of the program. So excited to be here.
Yeah, well, you have a podcast yourself, so this is second nature to you, I would say. But also, you have done a lot in your life. So before we get into this really important talk about not only getting unstuck but being unstoppable, I want to talk about your life, because usually when we think of pastor, we picture them at the church 24/7, and you are able to pull off a whole lot of stuff. How can you be author, entrepreneur, real estate investor, life and leadership coach? I mean, you name it, you do it.
Well, the best way I could explain that is just have a great team, great people around me, and it's been exciting to see the right people come around to do the right things.
Mhm. Well, you have a really important mission right now, and that
Yeah.
is to let people know you don't have to be stuck. You don't have to live in regret. But where do we all go to begin with?
Yeah, well, it's fascinating. When I wrote the book, Unstuck and Unstoppable, I
Mhm.
didn't do the beginning research because I was trying to write a book. I did it because I felt stuck. And as you said, I lead a great congregation here
Mhm.
in Richmond. And one of the things that I found coming out of COVID more than ever before was that people felt stuck. In fact, 80% of Americans right now,
Mm.
in one or more areas of their life, they feel stuck. And so not only did I feel stuck, but I was leading a congregation of people that felt stuck. So I just began to dive in and dig in and say, hey, why do people feel stuck? Why do I feel stuck?
Yeah.
And then how do we get them unstuck? But not only unstuck, but how can you build a life in a way that you can become unstoppable?
And so you have some simple tips that you walk through. I'm assuming through your book, but you're going to give us a sneak peek of that right now and just talk about it. And it all begins with these essential building blocks. First of all, how do we begin with identity? Where does that fit into all of this?
That's a great question. What we find is there are many reasons why people get stuck, and I identify those in the book. Just some of the basic ones: people feel isolated. They get stuck in unforgiveness, bitterness. They have a wrong mentality.
Mhm.
People get stuck in comfort and pain. And when you find yourself in these places, the best thing you want to do is begin to identify, where am I stuck, and then go to what you just said. I have identified four areas that I call the essential building blocks of life. And the first one being identity. Who am I? So, who am I? When we answer that question, it allows us, regardless of the situation, to begin to take steps forward. Let me explain. If you don't know your identity, and your identity comes through the labels people assign to you or what you do, when what you do changes, and maybe it's intentionally or unintentionally, you begin to feel lost.
Yeah.
And then as you feel lost, you begin to feel stuck. And it's why, not because you were doing anything wrong, not because when people said something about you, it was necessarily wrong. It's because you didn't know who you were. And when you
Mhm.
know who you are, then you can begin taking steps, even when you feel stuck, to get unstuck.
How do you figure out who you are? I mean, I think we're all labeled, right? Everywhere I go, I'm the news lady. I mean, they don't even know my name. Hey, there's the news lady. Or, to my kids, I'm only
Sure.
mom. Um, how do you find out who you are? Is that taking some time to slow down in this busy world and to
Absolutely.
reflect?
That's 100%. You're absolutely right, Melissa. One of the things, so first off, I'm a man of faith, and I believe that our origin is from God, and so you have to go to the one who created you. I
Mhm.
think many times we try to find ourselves through other means, but when we can calm ourselves, slow our pace, and it's one of the things that I do in the book. And the chapter 7, there's actually a worksheet that I have people walk through, because it does take time. It does take an intentionality. But here is the one question that you'll have to answer if you're going to discover who you are, your identity. It's this question, and it sounds so simple, But 20 years ago, when I answered this question, it was the hardest question I've ever answered. It's, who am I? Who am I? And you'll begin to answer the question. And the first part of it is like, well, I'm a, like you said, news anchor. I'm a pastor. I'm an entrepreneur. No, that's what you do. Well, at
Yeah.
the time when I answered the question, I had lost my restaurant. Some things went sideways. And I thought I was digging deep. I said, well, I'm a failure. I'm a fraud, all the things that when you start to spiral out of
Mhm.
control. I was faced with depression, and someone very close to me actually said, no, that's the emotional state that you're in. Who are you? You got to dig deep. And I felt very confused. And they said, well, just do this. Pray a prayer, ask God, the one who created you, to help you answer the question. And I did. And within, just a short amount of time, I began to write down some identity statements of who I was, which I now know 20 years later has been the true north of my life.
Okay, so you got to tell us. You can't leave us on the edge of our seats. Who are you?
Well, it's funny. I've got several identity statements. Here's one that 20 years ago that really helped. I'm a disciplined man, full of character and integrity, focused on God.
Wow.
At the time, I was very undisciplined. I did not have any character. I was not focused on God. And it began to uncover who I really was, apart from the even behaviors that I had in my life.
Mhm. That is powerful. I actually brought a tear to my eye. Seriously. Okay, so we figure out who we are,
Yep.
and it sounds like we got some digging to do. Then we got to
Yes.
find our purpose. So how do we go about doing that?
Yeah, your purpose. Now, I define purpose a little bit different. Purpose is not the ultimate end all of your life. For me, purpose is your assignment right now. And what I'm concerned about, there was a study that was recently done, and it talked about the great resignation, how people
Mhm.
all across the nation are just resigning because they don't enjoy their job, don't like it, they want to find something else. And I'm not against it. What I want to be careful of is that if we pursue what only feels good, we may be missing out on our purpose. There are many times that God will have us do things that are painful. I'm a man of faith. I go back to the story of David. David was anointed king in the Old Testament over the nation of Israel, but it was 15 years later before he actually became king. He actually stayed in the field watching his father's sheep, tending to them. He fought a lion, he fought a bear, and then ultimately we know he went to fight Goliath. But the point of it, when I illustrate even that story, is the fact that purpose can be painful. So the only time I encourage people to change careers, change what they're doing, is if it's an abusive environment. Maybe there
Mhm.
are seasons of change. Maybe it's a toxic culture. But there have been many times, and I know you know this, Melissa, where we have done things that we didn't enjoy.
Yeah.
We may not have even been good at it. But
Mhm.
now to this day, we look back and say, I learned some skill sets. I learned some grit. I
Yeah.
learned some tenacity. And so when I define your purpose, when you know who you are, you can stay in a tough situation
Mhm.
because that situation doesn't define me. I'm
Mhm.
already defined. And so purpose is finding your assignment
Mhm.
today and staying with it.
And I do agree. A lot of times when you get out on the other side, you
Yes,
actually end up feeling better because you say, "Hey, if I went through that dark time, I can do anything." And it
that's
almost
right.
makes you feel like you can accomplish even more.
That's
Okay,
right.
so now we know who we are. We figured out our purpose. Where does vision come into all of this?
If vision pulls you beyond your day of pain. Vision is fascinating because, we've heard corporate vision statements, get a vision
Mhm.
for your company. But what I found is many people don't have a vision for their marriage. They
Mm.
don't have a vision for their family. They don't have a
Mhm.
vision for their health. They don't have a vision for their finances. And if you don't have a vision in those areas of your life, then what you'll find is you get stuck in a day of pain
Yeah.
when it's hard, when you've lost your job, when your marriage is on the rocks, when your family is falling apart. And we've
Mhm.
all experienced moments where you feel like, my God, what am I doing wrong? The vision is what brings you beyond the now into a future reality. And so
Mhm.
when someone is stuck, here's what we find. People who get stuck start saying things like, I'll never, will never, it'll never. They've gone from being stuck to now feeling stranded. Stranded is without hope. And so the way I define vision is not a 20 or 30-year vision. It's here. If someone is stuck, when I coach people who are stuck, I say, what would unstuck look like in this area? So say I feel stuck financially. Well, what would unstuck financially look like? I feel stuck in my marriage. What would unstuck in your marriage look like? Because if I could just get beyond the now, and it'll allow me to focus on a future reality that is
Mhm.
different and better than the reality I am in right now. And
Mhm.
here's what I know: what you focus on, you produce. You become prophetic in your life, that whatever I behold, that's what I become.
Mhm. And
And
I always find when you are empty in parts of your life, let's say it's your marriage, the
yep,
more you put into it instead of pulling back and saying, I'm not getting what I want from my spouse, but the more you put into it, the more you want back. So if you're saying, hey, I wish my spouse was more romantic. Well, maybe if you have some candles lit on the dining room table
that's
when
right.
the honey comes in, you might be setting the mood for them to treat you the same way, right? So it's
That's
just
right.
like, or if you're stressed about finances, make that budget that nobody wants to do. I
That's
mean,
right.
it's making it sounds like corrective steps to get unstuck, not just picturing it, but then doing something about
Well,
it.
that's exactly, so that's how vision works. When you have the vision, say part of being unstuck is I want to have more romance in
Mhm,
my marriage. The
mhm,
vision now can back up into the purpose.
mhm,
So now purpose is what I'm doing. So what do I need to do on a daily basis to get to the vision?
mhm.
And so they all build upon each other, and it's based on where you want to go and how unstuck looks in your life.
And then we have the paradigm, right?
Paradigm is such a big thing. It's so fascinating. I actually thought the whole book was going to be on paradigm. Many people have heard identity, purpose,
Mhm,
vision, but paradigm is one, especially even in the Christian world, we don't really talk a whole lot about. Paradigm is the subconscious pattern of thought that runs in the background of your life. There was a fascinating study by the National Science Foundation. It was back in 2005, but they did a study. We as individuals and people, we have anywhere from 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts in a day. And what they found that was so fascinating is not only the amount and the quantity of thought that we have, but the quality, that 80% of our thoughts tend to be negative and 95% of them are repetitive. So
wow.
that means we are thinking the same negative thoughts day in and day out, and we're expecting our life to change, wanting our life to change, and it's not. And we find ourselves secretly sabotaging our own lives.
Those stats are crazy, but I believe it, right? There's so much background noise, and we're
Yes,
we're sometimes our own worst enemies, and we don't even mean to. So let's start talking about then how we are going to do even more to change this, and we're going to become unstoppable. We have to invest, first of all, some time into doing this. So if
yes.
if there are lots of, I mean, you talked about a lot of different places people get stuck. Maybe you just have one and you're lucky. Maybe it's just the finances this week, but if you have 10 on that list, you got to spend some time to try to dig yourself out of it all, right?
That's right. Well, that's such a great point. There are times in life where we have multiple areas where we feel stuck. Here's
Mhm.
how I coach people. What's the one area that if you got unstuck would make the greatest impact in your
Mm.
life? Because you
Mhm.
can't focus on all the areas, but what's the one area? And then begin to walk through the steps of even what I just said here. Even I have found myself, I've read, which is funny, but I've read my book 5 times because
I
it's one,
love
and
it.
this is post written. I just continue to go back. It's an
So
evergreen
awesome.
of, yeah, wow, why am I stuck? Because you got to self evaluate and
Mhm.
reflect. But the thing that I want to go back to is even the subconscious paradigm. We secretly sabotage ourselves, and then we're upset and blame everybody else. What I find is when
Mhm.
you have a place in your life where you've constantly made excuses, then you're probably avoiding the pain and the
Mhm.
trauma that continues to show up in the reality of your life. And I
Yeah.
talk about that trauma triggers, that as a young child, as a teenager, even as adults, we have these pain points in our life
Mhm.
that are unhealed, unresolved, and we're walking around. We're not only hurting and wounded, but we've got scabs
Yeah.
everywhere. And every time someone touches that pain, since it's unhealed, a scar is healed. You can point
Mhm.
to it, but it doesn't hurt.
Mhm.
But a scab, if you touch it, we jerk. And anytime you get triggered, you find yourself getting escalated in a conversation, that's a pain point that you've got to deal with. Otherwise, many times it can sabotage your life secretly.
Yeah.
And you find yourself walking in cycles, maybe relationship to relationship to relationship, job to job to job.
Mm-hmm.
And when we address it, it really is the steps and the pathway for us to get
Mm-hmm.
unstuck and become unstoppable.
Well, I'm really interested to see what you think about energy and how you feel that comes into play. As a medical reporter, I've done all kinds of stories on energy healing, which is a whole other conversation. But there is something that I think the majority of us just don't understand. But I want to see how you feel like we need to put all of our energy into this plan to get unstuck and be unstoppable.
Absolutely. Well, energy and focus, it's fascinating what you just said. I would agree. I was telling someone the other day, they were just lining some things up in my calendar, and I told them we're not managing tasks, we're managing our energy. I'm more energetic. I've got more creativity and ideas at certain times of the day. And it's the same thing in your life. What you want to focus your energy, your focus, the life source of your life into the areas that make the most impact. And if you'll do that and make it the priority, then it has the compounding effect in the rest of your life. Your life automatically gets better. It's the Pareto principle, right? The 80-20.
Mm-hmm.
We spend 20% of our time in things that have 80% of the impact. So spend your time in the things that have the greatest impact and
Mm-hmm.
let all the other things fall away. We get so distracted by the urgent and unimportant,
Yeah.
we forget about the things that are very important.
Oh, that is so true. And it's easy to happen. Finally, on this list is intentionality. How does that come
Oh,
into play?
intentionality. You have to be extremely intentional. And as you said, which Melissa, you really hit the nail on the head. It's the noise. It's the distractions.
Mhm.
And what I have found is this: people will live their lives stuck because they're coping. So it's not what we find. We get distracted with entertainment. We get distracted. People get distracted
Mhm.
with alcohol and drugs, relationships, the areas of their life. And instead of facing with intentionality the area that needs to be addressed, they just live life coping. In fact, there was a study that was done by Marks and Spencer with over 3,000 people. And in the study, they found that 95% of the people studied lived their life on autopilot, which means they are in the driver's seat of their life, but they are not driving. They're simply mere observers of their life because they've gotten into these habits of living on
Mhm.
autopilot.
When you say those stats, it just blows my mind because sometimes we feel like these things are something that we only think, but when you look at it, we're all in this together.
Yes.
It's like our brains just function in the same way. And I think it's important for people to realize that they are not alone. So once we figure all this out, I feel like it's just going to come naturally to feel more passionate about getting up out of bed,
Yes.
starting every day and living this purposeful life for me and for you, for God, and hopefully for a lot of other people's as well, and use that energy from him to help
Yes.
keep us going.
Absolutely. Well, and that's what I want to encourage you with. I believe everyone, and I'm sure you believe it as well, that God
Mhm.
created you with a purpose,
Mhm.
that you're not an accident. You may be labeled that by your parents or whoever birthed you. This is what I know, that God has a plan. There's an intentionality with your life. And if you'll discover that, you will live fulfilled. You will have a life of purpose and meaning, and you get to wake up every day loving what you do
Yeah.
because you've discovered that.
All right. Well, as we wrap up here today, I want to make sure people can find you because you are powerful. And I love your words. I feel like you could help people in their darkest hour or on a medium day or on a happy day. You are just a powerful force. So, again, your book, Unstuck and Unstoppable, where do we find it?
Yeah, you can find it at jimkyles.com. You can also go to amazon.com, the Audible version's there, the Kindle version as well, and would love to just get connected.
And then do you have a regular podcast that you can tell
I
people
do. It's
about?
called the same thing, Unstuck and Unstoppable. You
Right.
can find it on iTunes. It's through wherever you consume your media.
Mhm.
We'd love to have you join us in that conversation as well.
All right. Well, I have a feeling you could keep this conversation going and still continue to help a lot of people. Thank you for taking time to talk to us today. And I certainly wish you the very best. Keep us up to date and keep us going positive in the right direction.
Absolutely. Thank you, Melissa.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Take care. And that wraps us up for Lunch for the Soul today. But I just want to remind you, perhaps you joined us late. We got you covered. You can always go to Fox 26 Houston's YouTube page. You can, if you tuned in late, you can go back and watch the very beginning of it there, or you can catch all of our many other Lunch for the Souls there. If you have any ideas, you can always reach out to me at Fox 26 at melissa.wilson@fox.com. Thank you for being here on this week's Lunch for the Soul. We'll see you back here, same time, same place next week, 12:30 on Wednesdays. Have a blessed day.